Hi, I'm Joe Tyrone, your host this evening for Joe Tirade. Our podcast today is going to talk about this really big issue that's out there that's affecting all of real estate throughout the country, the NAR settlement. And we're going to really do a deep dive into something in some aspects that you've, I'm sure, never heard about. What is NAR's responsibility for this? How did it happen? Why did they settle? Why was the suit actually even brought forth, and how was it successful? How did they lose? And what do you do as a seller? What are your responsibilities as a seller? What do you expect from real estate as a seller? And the same thing on the buyer side, because it was a big thing about buyer's agency. And that's really what started the lawsuit, being represented by your agent as a buyer. And what are your responsibilities? What do you have to do in terms of what you're responsible for financially, and how do you get your deal done and potentially not have to pay your buyer's agent? These are the questions everybody's asking, but we got to go back to the root of the problem. And how do you fix it going forward? Well, Joe Tirade is going to show you how.
Joe, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate you taking the time to come back.
Sure.
There's been so much that's transpired since we last talked about the NAR lawsuit and what's happened and everything else since then.
Absolutely.
The question on a lot of people's minds, right, which is why I wanted to bring you back on, is why did realtors lose?
That's a great question, John. It really is a good question. You know what? You're asking that question, but who else is asking that question? Not many people.
Well, I think buyers agents are. Buyers agents are like, what the hell am I going to do? And I told you that joke. I want to. It was like a parody, but I wanted to bring it to this real quick because I saw this thing when this was all transpiring. You were the first person that I ever heard bring it up, and I work with realtors all over the country, in the UK, in Australia, in Canada.
Sure.
You know, obviously different countries, but but in America, not one realtor brought this to my team or I's attention. Like we heard of it going on, just from the whispers.
The NAR lawsuit you're talking about.
But then you were the one to bring it up and say, hey, let's talk about this.
Yeah.
And so in that era, I saw this video on Instagram where, and we're gonna pop this up here for a second.
Yep.
So there's the video, but the thing is on this video, it shows a guy going out to lunch with a friend of his who just happens to be a real estate agent, and he's telling his real estate agent friend, hey, I'm selling my house. And the guy goes, what do you mean? Why didn't you tell me? I could have sold it for you. I'm a realtor, you know that. And he goes, I don't want to bother you because the guy told me he'd do it for $1,000, like, whatever. So he goes, oh, dude, I'll do it for $500. He goes, oh, I'll give you the deal. And then as he's walking back to his car from the restaurant, he runs into another buddy who's a realtor, and he goes, telling him, I'm selling my house. You know what? But this person's doing it for $500. He goes, I'll do it for $100. So the whole joke now, and then back to like, who cares about it? I guess people who are more seasoned buyers, agents, are like, oh my goodness. Like, I don't think they're making it as a big deal, but I think they're definitely sweating, for the most part. But why do we lose the lawsuit?
But that's a great example. It's an exaggeration. Of course, that's never going to happen. You're going to sell it for $100. Okay, that's great. I mean, I don't think people would, You don't think there's going to be discount shops? I think they're going to start coming for buyers. I don't. If the profession comes out of this the way they should, it should have no effect on commissions. Honestly, it shouldn't have any effect. Maybe I think throughout the country, commissions have come down, but not substantially. So you're talking about in certain market areas, buyers agents were getting paid, let's say around here, like 2.5% on average. Now it's down to maybe 2%, something like that. But that still may organically go back up depending on really what happens with the people, with the realtors who are basically in charge.
Right.
Are they going to be able to work together and not conspire, but professionally and understand that there is this decoupling of commissions where you really should be negotiating your commission when you go to a seller? Say, okay, this is my commission. This is what we do, and this is what we've been doing. And actually, I'm going to go back to what you said before. I was the first one to bring it to your attention. I've been talking about this for 2 years. When the lawsuit was out there, that NAR basically said it's out there, but it's ridiculous.
And nobody believed it. It's not going to happen.
But don't worry about it. That I thought was ridiculous. So that's how we started doing, before this, we started making sure we had our buyer agent agreements in my team. And because we realized that the significance, it was going to be a significant event if we were to lose. But I mean, I didn't imagine to the extent that it is now, where you end up being what I think is a forced settlement, and smart that they settled. But it's really up to NAR to figure out how they're going to go from here. And your question is, why to lose the lawsuit? And it's because of that thing that you just showed, that parody, because that's what they're, they started this, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 years ago. It's realtors, it's who we are.
Right.
R with the R symbol as a realtor, and they really think that's
wait, time
great.
out, real quick. Don't forget your train of thought. But for people who don't know what the hell you're talking about,
sure,
real quick, why did this even become a lawsuit?
Well, it became a lawsuit because someone said that they felt that their representation was skewed, that they felt that they were not being represented properly,
yeah. by a buyer's agent.
Correct.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So do we know the single person who started it?
but it wasn't really the representation. It was the expense of the representation.
Understood. So
okay.
but doesn't the seller take that?
It was a seller. It was a seller whose buyer's agent had brought the seller. We talked about this on the last podcast.
Correct.
Where it was like the lead plaintiff was like, I this guy didn't do anything for me.
Why am I paying him?
Yeah, why am I paying him? Right? And you paid him because he sold your house, right? But he didn't have any control over the commission. He probably should have, if this was done properly, even before the lawsuit. Actually, it goes back to 30 years ago in the 1990s when buyer's agency became a thing. It started actually out in Hawaii and then California. They were doing buyer's agent agreements and buyer's agency. Slowly over in the 90s, it came eastward. It's weird. If you read the history, it's pretty weird. And then I believe that it was an NAR, a lawsuit against NAR, where a buyer said that they were not represented. Because the way it worked, and I was talking about that before, is that everyone, when you listed a property as a broker, listing broker, the brokers or agents that saw that listing in MLS were a sub-agent of that broker. So they basically work for that broker, which means they really work for the seller. So I believe there was a lawsuit sometime in the 1990s where someone said, hey, listen, I just bought a house and I was never actually represented. And they were right, because all of the paperwork showed that that person, that broker, that agent that brought the deal was working for the listing broker. And so they really were not.
So it was like a double ender.
Well, I don't know about double ending, but it was the fact that that person wasn't actually on paper represented. I don't think that realtors, licensed real estate professionals ever really understood what agency means. So in that particular case, I can almost guarantee you that agent who showed the house and got the buyer the deal never was like, I'm going to get the highest price possible for the seller. It wasn't that. That was in his mind, his client. On paperwork, it was not his client on paper. But I'm sure when they made the deal, he was advocating for that person, trying to get that person the best deal. That person came to him and looking for a house, and let me find you a house. And on paper, he was really working for the seller, but in actuality, it's almost exactly the same as it is today when you have a buyer's agent agreement. It was no conspiracy. They just didn't really understand agency in my mind. But they had that lawsuit. I believe that's what happened. But anyway, buyer's agency became a thing. Yeah, it became a thing. So. You said for me not to remember where I was, and I have no idea where I was. So.
I'm the same way. Okay, fuck, what did he say?
All right, so, but let's
so
go.
No, you were saying, so essentially you were saying 5 years ago this started,
so it's who
and
we
you've
are.
been flagging this up for 2 years.
But I was saying that, you said, why did we lose a lawsuit? It's because what people perceive realtors to be. That's why we lost the lawsuit, in my mind. So what do I mean by that? NAR has this thing for the last 5 or 6 years that they're really, and now they're doubling down on it. It's realtors, that's who we are, with the R as the realtor symbol, right? And that always, that didn't sit well with me from day one, because I feel that that's what they think, what realtors think, that's what membership thinks, but is that what the public thinks? I know that's what they want the public to think. Who we are means that we're strong, we're professional, we're ethical, we're this and that. But if the public really bought into that lawsuit, when it was brought, when they brought that lawsuit, it wouldn't have gone anywhere, because people, the reason it went as far as it did, and when they actually lost the lawsuit, in my mind, is almost the same reason, and this is kind of political, But almost the same reason why Trump lost his in New York. He's in New York, people hate him. They hate him.
So before it even started.
So before it even started,
right?
These
they already
guys,
had a preconceived.
They should have rendered their decision on day one, or the realtor, or the realtors, see that, or the jurors shouldn't have been forced to sit and watch the trial because they should have just rendered their decision at the end. They didn't need to see the trial because they don't like him. There's this prejudice, but it's not a Trump thing. This is a realtor thing. So to me, those jurors, we're going to find them guilty no matter what. It was absurd to me that whole case was ridiculous. That commissions aren't negotiable. I've been a realtor for 30 years, and I can tell you 100% they're negotiable. I don't do the same amount for everyone. I don't look what other realtors are getting. I mean, it's something that's out there and on the MLSs.
Can people negotiate higher? Have you ever seen somebody go higher than 3%?
Well, 3% for the one side.
I'm saying like if you're a seller and you go, hey, I'm a great seller, people know me in this area.
I can guarantee you that does happen. I can guarantee you that does happen. But basically, what happens more often is that if they decouple the commissions and they're talking about just the listing side, and I'm going to work for 3%. In those back before the lawsuit, they were saying 6%. And what a lot of people were doing, who were professional, who had a good following, and majority of the business was from referrals, they would say, I'm not coming, you can go to whoever you want. You can go 5%, 4%, 3%, and good luck. I charge 6%, and this is what I do for you. And then at the end of that conversation, the person said, oh God, that's really worth 6%, I'm gonna do it. And that's what realtors really need to do now, but not keep saying it's realtors, it's who we are, and it's like, that just doesn't fly anymore. Doesn't fly anymore. It didn't before, and to me now it's even worse. And so I think that NAR has to make a decision, and the decision is, like I'm on, I obviously get Realtor Magazine. I'm on their email list. I get all the emails. I read as many as I can, and to me their position is, we're tough, we're strong, we get through this before, we're going to get through it now. And they are treating, I hate this analogy, but they're treating the symptoms and not the disease. What is the disease? It's really membership.
Gotcha.
Not all the membership.
Yeah.
It's the members, and you can talk to any realtor, maybe have to be behind closed doors. I don't want to say it, like I'm saying it right now, that they are bad actors. There was just an article in The Real Deal, great article about how realtors are not being held accountable. And they gave some examples of these egregious things that the realtors did. And at the end, they would find maybe $5,000. And then they're back out there and they can do the same things over and over again.
Because they're like, who cares? It's only $5,000, I'm making money, I don't care.
That's the cost of doing business. And that's not acceptable. I think it's a different world we live in now. And NAR is operating as if this was 60 years ago. And they're not really being looked at. People are smart. And they have the ability to go and look, online, how what's the value of a house and stuff like that. But you still need a realtor to walk you through the process. This is probably, in most cases, the most valuable asset that you have. So it never made sense to me. Like if I lost a listing because you're a great guy, I see your Instagram, I see this, and I heard that you do a really good job. But I have my aunt's sister's best friend, who we know really well. Well, not that well, but pretty well. She just became a realtor, so we're going to give it to them. That just never made any sense. I would say, fine, okay, good. I'm not going to argue with that.
Yeah, like what?
But that's the reason that happened. And the reasons, the smart brokers, the shrewd brokers, there's a guy on Staten Island that hires cops, firemen, now bartenders, people that are in the public that know people, to get them to list with them because they trust them. It's a matter of trust. And they trust them for all the right reasons. They have a relationship with them. But are they the right person to guide you through this process? In my mind, very often they're not. I have
with the home, to your point, to even further your point, the home that my wife just bought last July, it was that exact situation. So my wife is also, she has a license for just our stuff, right? She's not out there selling other homes or whatever else. But we found ourselves in a scenario where we found our dream home. right? After losing 4 homes.
Yeah.
Right?
Very competitive.
Two scenarios that I think are similar to what you're saying, because we lost the 4 homes where one of them, we were the by far highest offer.
Sure.
And the realtor was well known in the area, right? I'm sure, and it was a very good neighborhood in the area, and I'm sure they had people that knew them already, wanted that place, and they wound up rejecting our offer. And we went back and forth, was not responsive. My whole point is when we found this home, which was, thank God we didn't get that house.
Okay.
Right? But
That's usually how it works.
Correct. So
when you're crying, I lost the house.
Yeah, oh my gosh.
It usually ends up better.
You get the better one,
I can
right?
tell you, it usually ends up better.
And thank God for us it did.
Yeah.
And so long story short, I sat there, and again, I'm in business, I'm also in sales too.
Sure.
And I think the advantage to being a seller's agent when you're up against a new buyer's agent, like what we're talking about here, who, Nancy's goddaughter is an agent now.
Yeah.
So it's like the benefit was for me, now I'm not an agent, but I smelt the blood in the water.
Yeah.
Right? Because I knew this is a new agent that doesn't do this.
Right.
So I went ahead and took advantage of that. Right? So because my wife was doing all the negotiation, because she has to technically, but we got this house and this deal done so quickly that nobody could believe it, because there was a bidding war before we got involved, and we came out on top because of that strategy. But when I look back in retrospect, with a seasoned seller who didn't just get a property because they knew somebody.
Seller's agent.
Correct.
Yeah.
That would have never happened.
Yeah.
So back to your point,
Yeah.
if you're out there trying to sell, I'm a big advocate of what you're saying.
Yeah.
Because even for the beginning with my wife, like I have a lot of agents that are friends and stuff, and also obviously clients. I made everybody consult her and get her to like up to snuff when we were buying or selling with her as the agent.
Yeah.
Because like, to your point, there's so many things
Yeah.
that you can get screwed by having a novice taking care of one of the biggest transactions of your life.
Yeah.
So anyway, back to
and
you.
It's so important, but people just for some reason, don't recognize that. And I don't understand. I don't know where the disconnect is. It's the biggest asset
in our lives.
Vast majority of the people.
Yeah.
That's their biggest asset. That's how they
100%.
save. That's why
Yes.
you always, we're always and America is great because we actually encourage that from day one. And I was talking on a previous podcast about how the mortgage industry supports that, where you can get up to 100% financing. Other countries, it's got to be at least 50%. With places, they don't really have a mortgage market, so you have to come out with, how can you do that? But you can do that here, and you can leverage the amount of money that you put down, and you can save. I'm about to sell a house for someone I went to high school with, actually, who bought this house 20-something years ago.
Yeah.
And no equity whatsoever, but paid 100-something thousand, whatever. I don't know what the number was. But we're going to sell that house at a substantial amount 20-something years later. That's going to be her savings.
That's
right?
her retirement savings,
that's
whatever.
her retirement, everything, because she was smart enough to do that, ability to do that, because she probably got a 90% loan, 95% loan, and she leveraged that. What was it? The most that she could have put down is $10,000, maybe, and now that has grown. That is probably the best investment she could have made for that $10,000. Plus, she got to live there, and do deductions.
It's a win-win.
So it's fantastic. It's wonderful. But then people, when they sell, you know what they focus on? What this lawsuit is focusing on, making it worse for people, as far as I'm concerned. Because if everyone's focused on commissions, they're all super focused on commissions. And I have had deals where the client is so focused on the commission that I'm making that they make bad decisions on what offer they're going to accept, or if they're going to list with me, because they're so hyper-focused on that commission. And that's what this lawsuit is doing. This lawsuit is so bad, I can't even tell you. So many reasons, but now it's getting everyone to focus on the wrong thing, commissions. Is commissions a part of it? 100%. And you have to, and if commissions were being fixed, that's antitrust, and NAR should be punished for that if they were fixing commissions. But they were not fixing commissions. But this lawsuit went forward, in my mind, because of people's perception, in this case the jury. That's why I kept saying they're going to win on appeal. Goes to appeal, it gets it out of the juror's hands into a judge, and then it's the rule of law that's going to make the decision, not people's perception of who they are, who they're not. And so,
and to your point too, a lot of people do look at agents in not the best light.
That's what I'm saying.
Correct.
That's terrible.
So there's already preconceived thought process
there
behind,
is.
this
It's
one
hard.
agent screwed me over, whatever. So to your point, I see what you're saying now. Yeah, I see what you're saying.
Yeah, so that to me is really the issue. That is the disease we have right now. So right now, the symptoms are, that you have to decouple the commissions. And these are things that should have been done 30 years ago when buyer's agency came.
Right.
Because when buyer's agency came to be, and that broker and was putting MLS and all the other agents and brokers that made their offers did it as a sub-agent. Once that changed, where they were actually representing the buyer, right? The only changes that they made, as far as I know, with NAR was that, okay, make sure you get your paperwork so people understand who you're representing. But everything stayed the same. The commissions, let's say there was 6%. When there was 6% before, there was 6% after. And when it was offered into the MLS, the same exact thing happened. You would go to your listing agent. You say, okay, I'm going to give you the 6%, and then that agent or that broker would say, okay, great, thank you, 6%, sign it up, and then they would offer out usually the rest of the country 3%, right. Staten Island 1%. That's right. Because they could do it, right? But they controlled what they gave to the buyer's agent, and that is to me the basis of that lawsuit. Because the guy said I shouldn't have had to pay that guy anything because he didn't do anything. Completely wrong. He sold his house. He did a lot for him. But that mentality was successful.
Wow.
How?
But the only thing I could logically understand, I don't agree with it. But the only thing, if I was to play devil's advocate, the only thing that seems logical to me is, so in most cases, if you're a buyer's agent, right? Let's just say I'm your client, right? And most times you're seeing a bunch of houses, you're schlepping around all these different places. No, I don't like this, that, whatever. And then eventually, boom, you find that house, right? So you did the work, you got them the buyer, boom, you should be compensated. But what I think makes sense just from the buyer's agent side is like, what about all those other houses you brought them to? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, of course.
So the seller's paying for that whole transaction technically.
The seller's the one with the money too, because
right.
what I told
they're
you
being
before
paid,
about
right.
the mortgage market supporting the industry, also the setup that NAR did supports the industry as well, because it's the one with the money that's going to pay the commission.
Correct,
right? And some people say, oh, that's ridiculous. But it's not ridiculous.
I didn't think about that.
Because otherwise, now the buyer has to, and that's how some people are interpreting the lawsuit, that now the buyer has to pay their agent, and the seller has no responsibility whatsoever. And if that is the case, what happens to first-time home buyers? What happens to veterans who are not allowed to put that into the deal as part of a concession? So that you kind of, you're messing up the system. It's a zero-sum game, and that's why I'm confident in saying what I'm saying, because if the buyer has to pay their agent, they're going to reduce their price anyway, so the seller's going to pay for it anyway. So why not doing it? So let's go back to that example, where in the lawsuit. Now let's say it was a 6% commission, all right? I don't know what it was, and it was 3 and 3, and it was like, I want that 3% back. I'm suing for that 3%, and I think through the lawsuit, that if it's a class action, so everyone's a part of it that ever sold a house, I think you're going to get like $15 each.
Yeah.
It was like, it's so ridiculous. But let's say it was done the way it should have been done, and this is where NAR, as a leader, as the ones who are really, responsible for this industry, right? They're the lead board for the country. They're the ones 30 years ago that should have decoupled commissions right then and there, because of the agency aspect of it. So Rebney started it January 1st of this year, decoupling the commissions, 3%. Let's say this person who sued, let's say that they did it that way because it was already in place. They negotiated 3% to the seller's agent, to the listing agent, and then the listing agent said, okay, what do you want to pay a buyer's agent? Because this is how it works. We have to attract the buyers. We have to get the buyer's agents. And what do you want? And they said, well, what do you recommend? Well, the rest of this market pays 3% in general. So to be competitive, you should do 3%. But if you want, in the way they're doing it now, you could offer out 0 and make them pay their own buyer's agent. What are the chances of you getting a buyer, blah, blah, blah. And then that person would have then cognitively said, okay, 3%, I understand how it works. I'm going to offer out 3%. Now, if they did it under those circumstances, and then the broker could have shown in court that, wait a minute, we already went through this, explained at this, and they knew that they were compensating the buyer's agent this amount. I think that court case would have come out totally differently because they would have understood, but they didn't understand. And maybe they, let's give them the benefit of the doubt. They maybe really didn't understand what that is, because a guy comes out and says, he didn't do anything for me, but meanwhile he sold your house. Right. He obviously didn't understand the process.
Correct.
But because, again, of this prejudice against this industry, it's who we are. I honestly, if they don't, I think they really need to make changes. And so I started to say before.
Don't forget at some point to say your refined slogan.
Okay. So,
at some point. I'm saying right now.
Well, I'm going to say it right now.
Okay, yeah.
Because if they don't make the changes that I'm recommending, and I'm not saying I'm the know-it-all, but something along these lines, they really address membership and they hold people accountable in a better way. Because there is professional standards, there's the ethics, there's code of ethics that they have, which are wonderful. They're great. The whole setup for NAR is fantastic. You have a lead board for the country, you have boards in each of the states, a very organized multiple listing system. It's fantastic. So there's people out there who are saying, we got to get rid of NAR. These are all opportunists who are trying to figure out how to make money, not people who really want to make a change for the community, in my mind. That's really not.
It's self-serving.
NAR needs to sit back and say, okay, let's figure out what's wrong with membership. Let's raise the bar. And they talk about it all the time. Why don't they do that? Why don't they raise the bar?
Right.
Why don't they raise the bar? I'm going to tell you why they don't raise the bar. Because if they raise the bar for entry, it's harder to get in, they lose membership. NAR has 1.5 million members. And what they do, and what's interesting.
Are they just US based?
No, actually now they are in different countries.
Oh, okay.
I went on a trade mission to Israel about 5 years ago to help them understand how trade associations work here.
Oh, get out of here.
It was sort of sponsored by NAR because NAR is going to different countries now. So they are becoming worldwide. Right now, everyone looks at NAR as
so this is more of a global
national
perspective.
Well, it's becoming global.
Gotcha.
So there's the certification that I have, which is Certified International Property Specialist, CIPS. Which they have been, is only, I think, which is insane. There's only like 1,500 members out of the 1.5 million. I'm one of the 1,500 that have that designation, which they teach you how they transact business or real estate in other countries. So they are, they're just like the NFL.
Right.
The NFL plays in London, and now the Major League Baseball leagues are doing the same thing. Everything is becoming global.
Correct.
Right. Everything in life.
We become the GAR.
Yeah. Like
the GAR.
Yeah, GAR. Maybe that'll help with the image, but.
So don't forget your slogan if you want to.
Yeah. All right. So I'll hit the slogan right now. If they don't enact these changes, instead of realtors, it's who we are. It's going to be realtors, it's who we were. With the R. Boom. So, really, and I'm telling you, I really strongly believe that. And I understand where they're coming from. We're strong, we're going to get through this. But I have to tell you that I really believe that that unless they make these changes, that 1.5 million membership, I would guess it's very similar to, I think in our association, a local association, there's close to 2,000 members. And probably maybe 200 to 400 maximum are the ones that do 80% of the business. So the other ones are there for the 1 or 2 transactions. They're the problem. I mean, I could give you instance after instance after instance.
My example was a perfect example.
Yeah, a perfect example. I mean, we did a deal last year where it was a police officer that did this on the side. And they're great. I mean, let's face it, I love the police. What they're going through in New York is absolutely ridiculous. And the fact that to be a police officer in this environment, I give them all credit in the world. So I don't mean to disparage this, but this is just a good example where they had this listed, a friend, it was a fellow police officer that listed it with their fellow cops. So there's the trust I was talking about. And the house never sold. So it expired and they came to us, someone else through a referral. And so we just looked at the listing and the pictures were horrible. The description wasn't good. The price was really off. There's all these different things. And it was listed, a little bit too high, but because it was listed for a year, it became stale. And in this new market that you're in, the worst thing you can do is let a listing be stale, because buyers are savvy and they see it's out there and it's stale. They're not even going to look at it.
Why is that sitting there?
Yeah, why is it sitting there? This is a perfectly good house. So we came in there, we have the thing that's called, Compass is great. I'm associated with Compass. I brought them to Staten Island.
Concierge.
And one of the reasons they have this concierge program, which is what we used here. Concierge is, Compass will lend the money for the repairs, and then at the closing, you pay them back interest-free. And it's like, it's one of those things, like it's such a
good to be true.
It's too good to be true that I might be able to, I don't know if I want to play this, but I have a recording of someone calling up and saying,
anyways, they don't look very, very swift to me. I don't believe half of the shit in your brochure. If it costs me anything, don't bother calling me. Otherwise, I'm interested. I don't believe it. Never bullshit a bullshitter.
Look, you can't bullshit a bullshitter.
Yeah,
there's no way this is true.
Yeah.
If it's true, call me back. If it's not true, don't call me.
Yeah, go scratch.
Go scratch. But it is. It's But anyway, so we used that. We only put, it was 1,000,001 listing, something like that. And we put only 5,000 into it. We got professional photography.
Yeah.
We priced it right. And
Yeah.
then Compass is great with the way they syndicate the listings through the Compass.com. They're actually want to be like the Zillow of the area, where you go to Compass.com before you go to Zillow. They're trying to replace Street Easy in the city.
Correct.
So they're putting all this money in technology and making sure that these listings get syndicated so other agents can see it, people can see it. And so we sold it within 30 days.
Wow.
At the price we told them we were going to sell it for. And
so they were stoked about that.
So the thing is, if you want to go back to that analogy, I would never go try to be a cop. I would fail. I would get killed, right? Because I don't know what I'm doing. So why, as a part-time person, and this is they
want the extra money.
I don't want to regret saying this because I'm not picking on that profession at all. But why do people think that this person can be the expert in this industry? That's why NAR has to pare down membership, because people need to understand that it's important to have the experience, and it's important to have a professional that really does it. In my mind, it should be a full-time profession. How many CPAs do you know that do it part-time? There are a few that are out there, but they don't have another job. They might do it at part-time because they're only doing it part-time. But they're not also a sanitation worker that's a CPA,
Well, and I wanted to talk about that, the AICPI example. So can you talk about that?
So this is really interesting. I came up with this years ago. I was talking to the guy Brad Inman from Inman, and I sent him an email, and I had never thought about it before, but I did some research and I realized that the AICPA, American Institute of Certified Public Accountants, and NAR were formed around the same time, within 10 or 20 years of each other, for the same exact reason. Same exact reason. They wanted to support membership, and their mission statements were identical. They were there to support membership for the benefit of the public. That's the elevator version of this mission statements. Identical, right? So I couldn't believe how similar they were, right? And for the same reasons. Because the real estate professional at the time, the late 1800s, early 1900s, were taking advantage of people because they saw an opportunity there. So they needed to form an association to prevent that. CPAs was the same thing. Accountants believe it or not, were taking advantage of people. So they formed these organizations for the same exact reason. But now, to use your type of an example, let's say at the Academy Awards that the envelopes are being watched over by a realtor instead of a CPA. How many people would believe that there were that it's legit? They would be like, "Wait a second, a realtor did that?" And I know that's an absurd example because there's two totally different professions, but it's sort of how they got to be so different. And in my mind, they really shouldn't be. So the bar to get in to be a CPA. I went to Pace University. I was in the CPA program. You had to have 4 years of accounting, and then you had to pass a CPA exam. Once you passed the CPA exam, which was a really hard exam, days to take, and then you have to work in a place for 2 years before you become a CPA. But as a realtor, you take a test. It drives me nuts. I see so many realtors, so many brokerages with A-frames in front saying hiring today. Do you ever see that with a CPA hiring today?
Never.
Would you ever see that?
No.
No, you would never see that. And so, and again, I know that they're different professions, but standards that they're being held to are totally differently. So if a CPA, and there's watchdog organizations, government organizations that watch over CPAs to make sure that they are ethical and they're held to a higher standard. But if they go down, they go down. The AICPA isn't there to defend them. NAR, in my mind, by not doing anything, and that example that I gave you with the Real Deal, showing that these really extreme cases where that realtor is still out there transacting business, is a bad thing. And that's how you lose lawsuits. That's how you lose trust. That's how you have people going to their friend's brother because they don't want to go out there and be exposed to this industry. And it shouldn't be, because there's a lot of really good professionals. Again, it's one of the reasons why I joined Compass. What they do is they vet their agents, they vet their brokers, and you come on board because you've already shown that you have been successful in the industry, that you're ethical. They do their background checks and everything. You know, they go out and they buy brokerages and stuff. But it's totally different. You'll never see an A-frame out on 10 East 53rd saying hiring today. Never in a million years would you see that. But other brokerages, that's what you see all the time.
Correct.
And it just drives me nuts because everything is set up right. It's really set up for success. I think they can come out of this lawsuit really on top of things. I am very optimistic that they can and they will. If you talk to any realtor and you ask them, what do you think the result of this lawsuit is going to be? They all say the same thing. And they say that I think membership is going to go down. It's going to be reduced. So when I just said before about with our local board, 1,000, maybe 200 to 400. So what is that? Maybe 20% of those agents are really transacting business. Does that mean it's got to go down to 300,000? I don't know if it has to go down to 300,000, but it certainly has to be reduced. But you don't see that in anything that they write. Anything that they write. And another analogy I'll use, because this also drives me crazy, because a lot of realtors will show how they, on their Instagram or whatever, that they're so busy and they did so many deals and they get awards for being top producers, right? Would you go to a CPA because that CPA said, you know what, John, I did 500 tax returns last week, and the week before that I did 1,000. Is that going to impress you?
Not necessarily.
Well, why would it impress you? Because it's saying, how can you do mine? How can you do mine? So that's, to me, the fact, it's good to have experience. It's great, that's an important thing to have experience. But to be a top producer, you did so many deals last month, to me means either you have this incredible back office that supports everything that you do, and like you're just like the head of the team, and the team is, and you have a team of like 15, 20 people. But yours, I'm talking about a single awards where this agent has done so many deals. I think it's nice. I think that it does say something about you, but it also, to me, means that you cannot possibly address all the issues that come up in each of those transactions.
Totally.
And I see that all the time in deals that we're on the other side, and we see the broker not doing what they should be doing because they're there on their phone in a let's say it's an inspection. They're on their phone getting their next client. They're not even walking through because they're a top producer. That's not the only reason they do that. There's some people that do that because they're not really qualified, because they might be playing a game on their phone. They're not, they might be playing whatever that game. I don't play any games, but whatever it is. So
Tetris. I mean, back in the day, it was Tetris.
All right, I don't know. It was apples or fruit or whatever.
Yeah, but I have an analogy I want to add to this. I said this recently, and I heard somebody. I was on a podcast with one of the reality TV stars of Real Housewives of New Jersey. Okay. Who's a client of ours, and she just was like, hey, everybody out there should go get a financial advisor. And I said, whoa, wait a second. Because obviously on my podcast, I want to make sure I filter a little bit. And I go, wait a second. Because if you get a financial advisor, right, and you just go find anybody, right, a lot of times what people don't realize is obviously there's a big portion of your money that they take if you don't get a fiduciary or somebody that is in that space. Yeah. But the point though is that you also should find a financial advisor, a real estate broker, anybody who's managing your money or an asset of any sort. You should look at, are they where you want to be in life? So back to the CPA. For my CPA, back before I started adapting social, I was using whoever my parents had, right? After assessing and starting to build this business at a young age still, I looked at it and I said, well, that CPA, isn't living in the area I would want to live. They're not in a nice, beautiful office space like I would want to be. And then I asked them a provocative question. and I said to the CPA, I said, how liquid are you? And he didn't want to tell me. He's like, that's not your business. Yeah. And I said, well, but are you financially wealthy or independent? And in better words, he told me it's not my business. I said, no problem. So I need to find somebody who is, because I want to live a life of that independence and that wealth. So if you're not doing it, how the hell do I expect you to do it for me? You can't do it for me. So then my point to everybody listening.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah. So the analogy I used, we actually had to cut it out of the podcast because she's famous and all that stuff, and I would have got screwed and roasted. But I said, the easier breakdown of that for people who don't understand it in layman's terms is, when I used to be in bodybuilding, I was never a trainer, but my trainer was absolutely fucking ripped, like jacked, right?
Right.
And he had somebody in his gym, because he owned the gym, who was not in great shape. Like he wasn't fat, but he wasn't like, he had meat on him.
But he was a trainer.
He was husky, right?
Okay.
He's a trainer.
Yeah.
So one day my trainer was like, hey, I'm going on vacation, but I'm gonna have you work with him. And I said, I don't want to work with him. He's like, why? I go, well, because he's not where I need to be.
Right.
So if he's not where I need to be, how the hell is he gonna make me be there?
Yeah.
So my point is that bottom line, tying this all back to this whole, buyer's agent or sellers, I would never trust somebody. So back to you, if a CPA said to me, I did 2,000 transactions a week, that doesn't matter to me. What matters to me is, okay, well, what does that mean for you? So for the real estate side, I would never, ever use somebody who doesn't have the experience, because this is the biggest transaction of our lives.
Yeah.
So why would I just trust somebody who, my cousin Sally's, nephew now is an agent. I know him, so let him just get the deal. I'll give him the commission, cool. But it's like, if you don't have somebody who's seen hundreds of deals, been doing this for decades or at least a decade, to me, the way I operate is I would never even give them a chance. Me personally. Yeah. It's too big of an asset to fuck around with.
Yeah, because a lot of times with people, they kind of like raise their eyes and when they realize it's the case, is often you're going to have an agent that needs that deal to close because they got to make their car payment, and that's bad. So here's a nice controversial statement for you, is that I always felt that there should be like a credit score that you had to maintain as an agent, because you are a fiduciary.
That's interesting.
Well, but it's the truth, because if you have a higher credit score, chances are you're not waiting for that deal to close, that you can make your payments because you're delinquent or this and that. People get in trouble, I understand that. But to have that responsibility for someone's largest asset and to potentially have a credit score of 400 or 500, to me, that is a mismanagement. And when you interview a broker, we should have our credit scores on all of our documents,
I agree.
That would never happen, because how anyone would lose. I don't know. Not that they have bad credit scores, but people would be against that. They would be insulted. But to me, that's a really great first step to say, okay, we do maintain this. But do you do that? If you're going back to the AICPA, do you do that for CPAs? And you don't do it for them. So why would you do it in this case? But in this case, I really do think that it does have an aspect. People should feel free to ask a person for their credit score. But this world that we live in, especially in New York, credit scores are meaning less and less. To me, I was taught credit scores really give a good example of the person's character.
I agree.
People get into trouble for different reasons. It could be a divorce, and maybe they have very high character. Their credit score was attacked or something, or it was hacked or something like that. But so there are definite legitimate reasons why people have a low score that should have a high score. You can make adjustments for that.
Totally.
But in general, it's not looked at. Like in real estate, you cannot in certain instances ask a tenant for their a potential tenant for the credit score.
Right.
To me, that is such an epic fail.
You're saying the landlord's going to get screwed.
And it's actually, to me, it's bad for the tenants too, because it's giving them a false sense of security that they're doing the right thing when they're not doing the right thing. And that goes really into some more, really social issues that we really not appropriate for here. So I know there's social reasons for that. I understand those reasons, but to me, it's just leaking out further and further that a credit score is becoming less and less important unless you're getting a mortgage. That's the only thing that it really matters for these days, and that shouldn't be. Credit scores are great. They're
important.
You talk about algorithms and all these other things.
Do you have a high credit score?
Well, I wouldn't be saying if I didn't have an 830 score.
I was going to say,
that shit, that's garbage. My father had an 830. I have an 830.
Wow.
But
what's the highest?
850.
Okay.
Yeah. So anyway, but I was taught that, and I'm always very cognizant of it. So if you're cognizant of it and you want to maintain your credit score, you got to do whatever you can.
But for somebody listening, real quick, this is a sidebar, but any tips on how to get to an 830? So right now I think I'm at a 790 or something like that.
Okay.
So like how do I get to 830?
There's a bunch of things. I mean, you could do a whole podcast on that, really.
Right. But if you're breaking down to like maybe top 3 things.
Whether it's the amount of credit that you're using.
Okay.
So if you have a credit line of let's say $200,000 and you're paying it every month, you have 150 out, plus you have a mortgage, plus you have car payments and stuff like that. The credit score looks at that and says, okay, you're pretty high leverage. Even though you're making payments, we're going to ding you. That's why you're at 790 instead of 830.
Gotcha. So you're saying, so as an example, let's just say, for instance,
keep the balances low and don't
always low.
And don't keep the credit cards out there.
Gotcha.
So some people will have. Let's say they have a credit card that has $1,000 limit.
Yeah.
And they have 900 on that card. Yeah. Then they have another card that is 5,000 limit, and they only have $1,000 on that one. In that case, maybe switch it over to the other one, because you're at 90% on one, you're at 10% on the other, or 20% on the other. So you have to be very cognizant of where you are, because the credit card companies will ding you for that. I learned a lesson that I had no idea. I was renovating a house, and Home Depot came up with this thing where you just don't make any payments for 6 months. So I was buying the house, I had to get a bunch of materials, so I bought all the materials, and this is great, interest-free loan. This is unbelievable, because I'm going to pay the whole thing off when I sell the house.
No brainer.
So I did that. Also, my credit score went from 830 down to 800 or 790. I'm saying, why? Because even though I just had to make the minimum payment, and my balance kept going higher and higher, and I was going to pay it off. In the meantime, my credit score went down.
Because you had that much debt on there.
Because my debt kept increasing.
Gotcha.
So the credit card companies look at that, oh my God, this guy can't make a payment. I did it for financial reasons, because
it makes sense to do that.
Yeah, it makes sense to do that, but it doesn't make sense to the algorithm. The algorithm is saying, this guy, he's in trouble.
Yeah.
He's in trouble. His balance is going up $1,000, $2,000 each month. We got to take him down a little bit. And so I learned that, so I never do that. Throw those things out when they get it. Some people's circumstance, they need that, and it's going to maybe affect their score. If the score is lower from 725, maybe only go to 715. I don't know. I'm not an expert in that, but I know the real basics. So anyway, so that's another reason that another way to raise the bar, but I really think that as a result of this, the NAR has to stop, and they have to think about how are they going to move forward with this. And it still makes sense to have 1.5 million members in this new environment. And so let's just talk a little bit. I think maybe people who are listening to this are really more interested in how is it work going forward? How is it? What do people expect? What can they expect?
Yeah.
And I think Rebney was right when they said that. I know that Rebney was right when they said we're going to decouple the commission. So you're going to, and this is what we do and my team does, when we negotiate with our potential seller, we say that we work for a certain amount, whatever that is, 2-3%, and then we give it to them to decide what they want to give out to the buyer's agent. And in the current environment right now, if you do decide to do zero, because now all the MLSs you have to sign something saying that you realize that you can offer out zero and expect them
to be paid by the buyer.
To be paid by the buyer. But in this environment right now, the way things are working, and one of the things they're trying to do, whenever an outside agency tries to come in and fix something, a business, it's always a disaster. So now you have the Department of Justice saying, this is what you have to do. So now you're taking off of all the MLSs, starting in August, I think, what the compensation is to the buyer's agent. So that's going to throw this industry, especially in New York, is in total disarray. Between this property condition disclosure statement, where they included in downstate New York, where they included flood disclosure, which is badly needed. That's another reason why NAR just is not fitting the bill, because they were against this. Austin Perez is a government liaison for NAR, and 10 years ago, 15 years ago, one of the colleges did this big research project on flood disclosure, and they asked a lot of stakeholders. I happened to be one because I had just gone through the buyouts after the Superstorm Sandy, where the government gave people the pre-storm value of their homes and then knocked them down and returned to nature. So I was one of those out of maybe, I don't remember, it was 10 or 12 people across the country, maybe a little bit more. He was the only one who was against it. Why was he against it? He was against it because he was afraid there was going to be membership pushback. And it wasn't that he was just afraid, because he was for it a couple of years before that, where he was for flood disclosure. And he got pushback from membership, so they changed their position. NAR is a leader. And go back to the mission statement, benefit of, they're there to serve membership for the benefit of the public. How does that benefit the public? It doesn't. It really, and especially in this climate, all these climate change initiatives, NAR should be on the forefront about flood disclosure. And they're still not. That's a problem. Why are they not? To me, because they're protecting membership. Not protecting membership to keep them safe.
You want to save the money.
They want
the fees.
They want to keep membership so they continue to get the dues.
Gotcha.
And that's a problem. That's a conflict to me between them and their mission statement about serving the public. Because you really have to, you put these new things in place, and if it stays $1.5 million, then it stays $1.5 million. It's okay. But you're going to be able to say, realtors, it's who we are. Because you're going to have substantial history of who we are. But right now, to me, it's a slogan that's embraced by the industry, but it's not embraced by the public for the most part. And what's proven, it's proven by this lawsuit. This lawsuit proves that it's not embraced by the public, and it has to be embraced by the public. So how do you do that? I mean, we went through a couple of different examples, but I know that in New York they just changed the amount of hours to be increased to become a broker. I think even to become an agent. But it's got to go beyond. It's got to go beyond that. Look what if you go to what CPAs do. To become a CPA, you need to work for 2 years. So before you're a licensed broker, maybe you need to work in an office, maybe an admin position,
like an apprenticeship or something.
Like an apprenticeship, where you cannot. There's certain things you can't do. Just like a staff. Can't talk about price or something like that in a brokerage. There's limitations. So maybe something like that. But again, once you do that, then you're gonna lose membership, because either because people are disgusted and they don't want to deal with that, or they can't comply, one or the other. So what can they do? And so one of the more maybe controversial ways to handle this is, I mean, in NAR a couple of heads have rolled, but they have rolled for different reasons completely. Sexual harassment, stuff like that. But I don't know of anyone who lost their position in NAR, any CEOs from any board anywhere that lost their position in this, because everyone in my mind was asleep at the wheel. This lawsuit didn't just pop up.
Correct.
It was there for years, and they knew about it, and they did address it. Oh, by the way, there's a lawsuit asterisk where we have our attorneys on it, blah, 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 and it failed. That completely failed. And now they want to present themselves as the experts, and this is how we're going to get through this, and this is what you need to do, like they're the experts. Well, maybe they are. They should be. They certainly should be. This is a trade association, and they get paid for it. But to me, there has to be almost a gutting, which is really extreme, for the board at NAR, local boards, because it's obvious to me that the people that they're attracting, a lot of times it seems to me, and again this is controversial, that in this industry, coming from a corporate environment, I came from investment banking, and I have been involved in boards, for the last 20 years, non-for-profits and stuff. It just seems to me that these real estate trade associations are filled with people who are, not filled with people, but there's many that are corporate wannabes. They are on the board because it's like prestigious, it's fun, it's enjoyable, they get to travel, this and that, but what are they really adding to the pie? So you can't go in there and forensically pick them out, but one of the things that you can do, and they should do, is that, like on our local board, we always have a non-realtor member, and it's usually an attorney, and then maybe some other practicing person. We had a guy from a
different angle, perspective, I guess.
A business perspective. That number, instead of being, so we have like 20 something people on the board here, one or two. So what do you have So maybe 10% of the board it should go to 25%, in my mind, of outside people, business people that can look at this. Because I think if they had that in place before this, well before this lawsuit, or when the lawsuit surfaced, and you had business people looking at it, the answer would not have been, we got this, the attorneys are on it, we're going to take care of it. Don't worry about it, but worry about it. Just look at it. Don't ignore it, but ignore it. It's like, if you had 25% of business people, they would look at it from a business perspective and say, what are you talking about?
Correct.
What happens if you lose this? That didn't happen. It didn't happen. And
so
to me, no, it's not biased.
I'm saying the opinions internally, we're not thinking about an outside source.
They're just trained to think a certain way. They bring in new people. The way the whole thing works, where you put yourself as a candidate to get onto your board. The same thing works with the state. The same thing works with the national. And you get up there, and your resume is included and stuff like that. But it's the same people. So how are you going to be able to? The only thing that changes now is maybe they make sure that there's maybe more minorities on the board, and they're cognizant of stuff like that. But why not be cognizant about getting other people outside the industry to look at this? And like look at the board of Apple. Do you think they're all computer people? No,
right.
No, they're not. Or any board, IBM.
Most of them are probably not. They're just
most of them
wealthy.
are probably not.
Right.
Al Gore's not I don't know if he's still on the board. He's a crazy person. He's on there, but he adds to the to the whole board by being a person who's been in politics and whatever. Just using him as an example.
Correct. Right.
But I think that's the way to do it. So when I say gut, it's not like 80% or something like that. But if you replace them with some people in there, and how you would go through the replacement would probably be when they end their term, you're going to fill it with other people, so you're not pulling anybody out. So it's not, too hurtful. I think that would really lead NAR to understand that they need to make these decisions, these tough decisions about reducing membership and becoming more effective. And maybe with that reduction of membership, we've been talking about on our local board forever, you raise the fees to be a member of that. Also raises the bar of people who enter. Right now, someone wants to sell their aunt's house, they spend, $1,500 to be an agent. They take the test and they go list their aunt's house and they get a commission of 20 grand, whatever. And if they get both sides, it's maybe more than that. So it's worth it. But what are they adding to the professional nature of this business? They're in there their first day after they get their license. They're listing a home. That's ridiculous.
Correct.
And NAR will never say that. And the local board here will never say that. It won't say it. But it's ridiculous. And that, what happens is it misplaces the trust that people put on them. So they may really trust the aunt. The aunt may love them, but the aunt doesn't know what she's doing, or the uncle, or the friend, or the neighbor, or the municipal worker, whatever. They just got their license. They have no business of listing your house. They have no business. They may have, a training thing, in each of the brokerages that try to help them through. But it's real life issues that make you realize that, we should realize that, hey, I really don't belong here, or I need some help. But then you're in the middle of a transaction and you're going to cost these people money. What's another thing that's really hard is to quantify. I can look at a house and I can see that house sold, and I can look at that house and say, okay, I know that I would have sold that in a shorter period of time and for a greater price. But prove it. I can't prove it. I would have to relist it for you. But I know the market so well, and my team knows the market so well, they would look at that. We turn down listings where people say, I want this price.
Unrealistic price.
Unrealistic price. I say, I'm just not your broker. And then they'll go. It happened to me like 3 or 4 times at the end of the year. And one of those 3 finally sold. So we're now, that was in like October. We're now into June. It just sold a few weeks ago at the price that I recommended, 20-something thousand lower than what they listed at.
Okay.
So it's so that I can quantify, right? Because I can say, I told you it was worth that in the beginning, but you would have got that price and maybe more back in October. But still, it's really hard to show what people are leaving on the table. So anyway, and then to sum it up, I started talking about what to expect. I told you on the listing side, on the buyer side.
Hang on one sec. So, you can't keep going.
Okay. On the buyer side, this is this is how we deal with it, and this is what I think our trade association is having a Zoom conference on buyer's agency, is you can, because of the way things are working, and you have a client who does not have the ability to pay you,
Right.
you can put in your offer that you're having the seller pay whatever it is, and that's
Right.
what we do. That's what we've been doing. So our buyer's agent agreement says we're going to work for example, 2%. And if the seller's offering 2%, that's what we're going to work for, 2%. But if the seller's working for nothing, is offering nothing, and
Right.
then we're going to submit our offer with your 2% that they know they have to pay it. If they refuse to pay that, then either you have to come up in your price to include that, or you can pay us directly for that.
For that
And
fee.
we give them. And we had that happen twice with first-time home buyers. And I think the compensation that was offered was like 1%. We were asking for 2%. We just waived our 1% because
Yeah.
we knew that they couldn't pay it. They couldn't come up in price.
Right.
So that's a judgment call for each particular agent. But I think that that's going to cause some confusion and some animosity between agents, because there'll be an agent that's going to say, I'm not going to present that offer with your additional 2%. Because you don't know what they negotiated with their seller. They may have told their seller, and I expect this to happen, that if rates are, commissions are generally, let's say 4% in the area, they may say, okay, all we're charging is 4%.
Yep.
And that 4%, if it's decoupled, is just to the seller's agent. And
Correct.
say, you don't have to pay anything. You
Right.
can sign this buyer's agent agreement at 0. Right? You're not offering it, this buyer's agent offer at 0. So you're only paying 4%. And like,
Right.
okay, cool, but they really don't understand it, right? So now you have a transaction where I come in and I say, okay, here's my offer, but you're going to deduct 2% to pay me. That's in our deal. So if it's $1 million offer, it's really $980,000 because I'm asking for 2%. So you have to
Gotcha.
look at that at $980.
And from the
and
beginning,
then
yeah.
that seller may say, hey, wait a minute, I'm already paying you 4%. I think I'm paying 6%. So then that seller could say, well, I want that 2% to come out of you.
Yeah, I'm
the
not paying
4%,
it.
I'm not paying.
Right.
And to me, I'm afraid that's going to be a basis for discord between agents.
Yeah.
I hope it doesn't happen, but I kind of think it's inevitable.
I can see it
because
definitely
it's
happening.
really not
Yeah.
clear of what the rules are. So I've listened to so many different podcasts about how this is going to work, and here's another one. So maybe there's another opinion, but to me, no one really knows the answer, and they always put an asterisk on that, saying, okay, this is how I think it's going to work.
Right.
But I'm not really sure that is how it's going to work, how it's going to play out, because there's no set rules. But again, it's the DOJ coming in saying you have to change your policies to this and that. What does that mean? We don't know. They're not going to give you the answer what it means. It means that when you're there in the transaction, you got to
Right.
figure it out.
That's how you figure it out.
So
Right.
I think that that this lawsuit has done way more harm than good. And again, what it's done in summary is focused people on the wrong thing, which is commissions.
Yeah.
Because if they can get the cheapest commission, they can get the best deal. That's not going to be the case. Realtors,
Right.
licensed real estate agents and brokers, the right ones, provide a tremendous amount of service to an individual.
Correct.
They're going to protect your asset. They're going to get you the best possible price. They're going
Right.
to help you buy something at the best possible price because they know what they're doing, and it's worth it.
Right.
Whatever that is, and what's worth it is whatever the public is willing to pay. And so that's how it should work, and that's how eventually it will work. But to get there right now, God bless. I don't know how it's going to work. We're just
Right.
staying tried and
We'll just have to keep going on the path.
we just keep going on the path.
Yep.
We just stick to
Yeah.
to what we think is right, and we're very cognizant of what the new rules are. We make sure we follow that, but we're able to guide people through this.
Yeah.
The waters are so tough. I started talking about the property condition disclosure statement in Staten Island because it was so confusing and it was forced down people's throats. Again, flood disclosure. If it was taken by the local trade association, if it was taken by NAR, this would have been discussed, and it wouldn't be an opportunity for the state legislature to say, there's no flood disclosure. We've had terrible storms around here. We're putting it into this property condition disclosure
Right.
statement that you used to be able to give a $500 credit and waive your responsibility as a seller to fill it out,
Right.
and you give the 500, they can do their own inspection, buyer beware. Now with the new legislation, you can't do that because of
Right.
flood disclosure is in there.
Yes.
So in Staten Island, which does things their own way, they created what they call a super waiver or a rider waiver, where
Right.
they're going to give the 500 anyway. So in
Right.
some deals, you do the waiver, some deals, you don't do the waiver. That's confusing. NAR, the deals in the offer, it's not in the offer. That's confusing. So right now, it's
Yeah.
tough. And if there's ever a time
Yeah.
where you need a professional agent, and this is not a
Definitely now.
commercial,
Yeah.
it is now, and especially in New York City, especially in Staten Island.
So in wrapping this, so first off, thank you so much. We're grateful for your time, and obviously you, again, really having your finger on the pulse with what's going on here. For people who are in your area and say, hey, I want to know more about this, or as a buyer or a seller, and they want to know, let's end with you just sharing how they can contact you.
Sure, you can email me at joe.tyrone, Tirone, @compass.com, or you can call my cell at 917-913-2857, and my website is thejoetyroneteam.com.
Bam. Joe, thank you so much, man.
Okay.
Bam.
Okay.